Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Delaware Public Service Commission meeting of May 3rd, 2016. As you can see, Commissioner Conaway is not here today. She has an appointment out of state. She'll be back for our next meeting. Ms. Iwery is here. Okay.
Thank you, and my apologies.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your flat tire and problems getting here. I'm not sure if it'll be smoother for you here or not, though.
I hope so.
Okay, good. With respect to the agenda, the first thing on the agenda is the reading of the meeting minutes of April 19th. Does anyone have any changes or corrections they would wish made to the minutes of April 19th? Hearing none, would someone kindly make a motion to approve those minutes?
I shall move to adopt the minutes of the last meeting, April 19th.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes of April 19th? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. On the consent agenda, there's an unusual absence of items. So we'll move on to the regular agenda, the first of which is in the application of Tidewater Utilities for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. And we have, I guess, Joe Donahue here to get this one started.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. You have before you proposed order number 8885. This was based originally on a submission which included a petition that was signed by an engineer, and after staff reviewed the initial submission, staff suggested that this was more appropriately handled under a different code section. So the county, which owns the property, did submit a certified resolution from its governing body, and that became the later application which is being submitted for your approval. There are two waivers in this request, and they're based on timing. Because the original submission was based on a petition, the waivers are based on the timing of the notice of the application and also a waiver based on the publication of the notice in two newspapers. Staff has reviewed the completed application, and they recommend that you approve this submitted application, which is now complete, and also grant a waiver of two of the regulatory requirements, which are based on the notices. In this proposed order, it does have a listing of the good causes, and staff supports all of the reasons given for granting these two waivers, and therefore would urge you to adopt proposed order number 8885.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. Ms. Higgins?
Hello, I'm Kirsten Higgins from Tidewater Utilities. We are in support of the order, and we wanted to thank staff for working with us as we changed the basis for this application from the petition to the resolution. It is one parcel of land owned by Sussex County. It is a pump station. It is contiguous to our existing service territory in the Rehoboth District, and we ask that you approve the order.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Ms. Iwery, any comments?
No, thank you, Chair Winslow.
Any questions from the commissioners with respect to this proposed order?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Commission adopt order number 8885 as submitted.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order 8885? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Ms. Donahue. And the first item on the hearing schedule is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light Company for the approval of the 2016 program for the procurement of solar renewable energy credits. This is Delmarva's application, and the Commission welcomes Ms. Scott and her team.
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. Pam Scott here on behalf of Delmarva Power. We are here today in connection with the 2016 SREC procurement program application, which Delmarva filed based on recommendations from the Renewable Energy Task Force. The application that was filed included the program outline for 2016, the form of SREC transfer agreement as part of the program, and Delmarva's report in support of the proposed changes to this year's program. Notice of the filing of the application was published in the Delaware State News and the News Journal on November 6, 2015. I have with me today Glenn Moore, who will serve as Delmarva's witness in this matter, and I ask that he be sworn. Please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Could you state your full name for the record, please?
Glenn Allen Moore,
And by whom are you employed?
Delmarva Power and Exelon Company.
And what is your position with Delmarva Power and Exelon Company?
I am the Regional Vice President for Delmarva Power.
And generally speaking, what are your duties and responsibilities in that role?
I have responsibilities for our Newcastle region, which is Newcastle County, Delaware, Cecil and Harford County, Maryland, but I also am responsible for all of the full Delaware issues before the Commission related to solar and other activities.
As part of your responsibilities, do you serve as Delmarva Power's representative to the Renewable Energy Task Force?
Yes, from the beginning.
And what is the purpose of the Renewable Energy Task Force?
So the Renewable Energy Task Force was formed out of legislation on October 26, 2010. It's an 11-member body. Those 11 members are, each of the utilities has a representative, Delmarva, the co-op, and munis. There's a representative from the Public Service Commission, from the Advocate's Office, from the Delaware Sustainable Energy Utility, the Delaware Solar Energy Coalition, environmental groups, MoTech, which used to produce panels in Delaware, and DuPont.
And could you give us a little bit of background on what their role is in this particular process?
Sure. By legislation, I'll go over a couple of the key issues that the task force, as it pertains to solar, is in charge of. So it is charged to establish a balancing mechanism for solar RECs trading in Delaware. It establishes SREC aggregation mechanisms and other devices to encourage deployment of solar technology in Delaware. As a matter of fact, there is a bonus system in play in the legislation that if you have manufacturing equipment from Delaware, you get a bonus, or if you use Delaware labor, you get a bonus. And after the analysis is done by the task force, an annual progress toward achieving these minimum standard percentages after a factual analysis are to make a recommendation to the Commission. The fourth one, a very important one, minimize the cost of complying with the renewable energy requirements in the state. The last two, establish revenue certainty for appropriate investments in renewable energy technology. That is including but not limited to long-term contracts and an auction mechanism, both of which we have and both of which we're asking for permission to do an auction. And last but not least, to ensure that residential, commercial, and utility scale solar systems of various sizes are financially viable and cost effective in Delaware. As you can tell, this is a very diverse list, and for the new commissioners, I use the word, it's a really interesting balancing act from a cost perspective and in making sure the small residential, commercial, and utility scale have an opportunity to flourish in the state of Delaware.
Did you participate in the meetings in the task force in developing the recommendations for the 2016 program of which this application is a part?
Yes, I did.
And before we talk about the specifics of the program, could you give us a little bit of a sense of how the auction for 2015 went?
Sure can. First and foremost, 2015 was the fourth auction that has taken place in the state of Delaware. The auction really splits the auction into three tiers. Those tiers are the residential class, the small commercial, and then the large commercial. Again, going back to the requirement of trying to make it viable for different sizes. In 2015, the base auction by those tiers was trying to procure 9,000 RECs. In addition to that, for the first time in 2015, Delmarva had the sole option of taking an additional 3,000 RECs at the lowest available price. Therefore, we could take as many as 12,000, which indeed we did take the 12,000. The auction was very evenly bid. We want to make sure we have a robust auction by tier. You don't want one tier to be undersubscribed, and they all were very well subscribed. The price of the auction totally was $78.78. That was for all 12,000 recs. That was up slightly from 2014. However, the 9,000 recs in the tiering process were actually about 5% below what they were in 2014. These are 20-year contracts. The first 10 years of the contract is based on the bid price that's awarded, and the last 10 years are a relatively low $35 a rec, so that the company has the availability of those recs for 20 years because the RPS requirements go out for quite a long time. Last but not least, to put that in perspective, Delaware, again, has probably the lowest by far of the rates for contracts around the regions. Our sister company over in Atlantic, in New Jersey, the average price for a contracted rec is over $240. So 3 times what we're paying here in Delaware. So it was a very successful auction. It was well balanced, and the auction process has served us well.
What is being changed in this program compared to the 2015 program?
So the 2016 program will be the 5th auction year, and the good news is there are very few changes now year to year. I certainly don't want to say we have it right, but the committee has done a pretty good job, and there are really only 2 small changes to the auction. As I indicated, in 2015, we put 12,000 recs on the auction, 9,000 in the tier, 3,000 that has discretion by Delmarva. In 2016, we have 9,000 in tier, and we've increased the discretion up to 6,000 recs. Again, we can take them if we perceive that the price is an appropriate price to take. So that was one change. The other change is the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 used to stop at 30 kW. We changed it to 25. And the only reason we changed it is, as a green energy fund, its break point is 25 kW. Those were the only changes made to the auction for this year. And fortunately, the auction has been pretty stable over the last several years.
So just to confirm, for purposes of the program, we still have the 5 tiers that we draw from. The SEU is still the administrator of the program.
That is correct.
We still have the auction run by Incline.
That is correct as well.
And we still have the 20-year contracts, as you indicated previously.
Correct. Tier 1 actually has the small new residential up to 25, and it has all the existing facilities as well. One of the things, as I indicated, is we want new construction, but there are a significant amount of facilities out there that have been built in the past. So if you have an existing facility, you can bid into the auction under the Tier 1 along with the small, and the lowest price in that auction wins.
And when did Delmarva file this application for the 2016 program?
The task force finished its work with another unanimous decision in the summertime, and we filed on October the 8th of 2015.
And then at some point, did Delmarva table their application?
Yes, we did.
And why was that?
So as I think everybody in the room understands, when the task force last met, it was clear from the staff and the advocate that the rules around the cost cap were not yet complete. And I think both the staff and the advocate, as well as others, wanted to see the rules completed and a calculation done. When we originally put this on the schedule for January, all of that had not taken place, and it was clear that that would really muddy the waters with the auction, so we asked for that to be tabled, and it was.
And then those things are now in place, is that correct?
Yes. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of January, they put the final regulations out. On March 15th, DENREC made the determination that we would not have a cap, and I think there was a final letter that came out last week that the cap has not been exceeded, and we had asked it to be put back on the table so we could have the auction for 2016.
In addition to the cost cap issue, did the Division of the Public Advocate have any concerns about the 2016 program?
Well, yes, they had.
2017?
Yeah, they raised really 3 issues around both the 2016 and potentially the 2017 auction.
And what were they?
So the first one, which I think everybody agrees with, including the task force, Tier 3 currently ends at 2 megawatts. If you're above a 2 megawatt facility, none of the auctions have allowed you to bid in on that. Usually when you start to get to about 5 megawatts or greater, you call that the utility scale. And up to this point, the utility scale has not been allowed to be in the auction for a couple different reasons. Well, probably the main reason is the fact that we do have a utility scale under contract. It's the Dover Sun Park. It is clear from the advocate, the staff, and the committee who discussed this at the last of the task force meetings, 2017 will certainly be the year of how do we handle and include utility scale into the auction for 2017. The second one was a smaller issue, although it's something that we've focused on. Tier 2 is that small commercial, put on top of McDonald's, very small buildings. That tier has historically been the highest price. They don't get the benefits of economy of scale of the Tier 3, which are the larger ones. If you've ever been to the University of Delaware and looked at the old field house, those solar panels are on there. That's a Tier 3 new construction that was done. Tier 1 is residential, and the residential prices have been relatively low. Tier 2 has a fair amount of work they have to do from permitting. They don't get quite they don't get the economies of scale of the Tier 3. So that tier has historically been the highest. And I think the advocate is right, and I think the task force needs to determine, do we continue to have a Tier 2 or do we combine it in one of the other tiers? And that will certainly be an issue for the task force for 2017. The last issue they raised was the fact that, do we take advantage of leasing models? And maybe I misunderstand how this is. What happens in the solar industry on the residential side, somebody in essence will rent your roof. So they own the equipment on the roof. They in essence give you a rent, and then they take all the recs. We have not asked historically whether you're a leasing company when you file an application. We will in 2017. But through knowledge of who's a leasing company only, probably around 25% of all the bids in 2015 were from leasing companies. In addition to that, the intelligence tells us there were 2 fairly large leasing companies that did not participate in the 2015 auction, and they've suggested that they will indeed bid on the 2016. We probably have a bigger issue with leasing to make sure we don't get some market dominance, that they can throw a fair amount of recs into the auction and start to manipulate the price at all. So I think we utilize leasing. They're certainly in play, and in some ways over time we may need to protect ourselves to make sure they don't have market manipulation. Those were the 3 main issues that were raised by the advocate, if I read it correctly.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add as part of the application of the task force?
No, there isn't.
Mr. Mori is now available for questions from the commission or cross-examination.
Any of the commissioners have any questions of Mr. Moore? Ms. O'Leary, you probably have a couple of questions.
I do.
Please proceed.
Hope you weren't hoping I wasn't going to make it.
No, I was hoping I would come get you if I needed
really
to.
disappointed if
Mr. Moore, how many SRECs does Delmarva need in 2016?
The 2015 compliance year needs 73,250.
And that's going, okay.
That's from June of 15 through May 31st of 16. That's the compliance year.
Okay. And on page 10 of Delmarva's application, in the section called Public Interest, Delmarva states that one of the primary differences between the 2015 program and the 2016 program, and you discussed this actually in your testimony today, is an increase in the number of SRECs to be purchased through the long-term auction, correct?
That is correct.
How does an increase in the number of SRECs to be purchased improve upon the results of the 2015 auction?
Well, the reason for the increase is the fact that when you look at recs under contract, the recs under contract are less than what the task force recommends or suggests. The task force recommended that about 10% of our recs come from the spot market. We're now, I don't want to give too much information away because there are solar providers in the room, but our spot market is now upwards of 20% of our recs come from the spot market. So we increase the amount of recs to make sure that number does not get excessive.
And that is how the 2016 program improves on the 2015 program?
Well, it improves the amount of RECs to stabilize the market because a robust market will traditionally give you better prices than a non-robust market.
Does that ensure the lowest price for SRECs?
Does it say that again?
Does increasing the number of SRECs to be purchased in the auction ensure the lowest price for SRECs?
I think the process ensures through the auction the lowest price. Clearly, as you increase the demand for RECs that the company needs through the RPS, the price can slowly go upwards because you're demanding more RECs. So it's not a question of the lowest price. It really is a determination of how many RECs need to be under contract to protect the customers from volatility going forward. That was the determination of RECs. The auction comes out as the auction comes out. I'm not sure if, I'm not sure that answers your question, but and again, I think as I indicated in detail, minimizing the cost is clearly a criteria of the auction, but not the only criteria of the auction.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What discussion has there been during the task force meetings about minimizing the cost for complying with the RPS requirements?
Oh, I think since the beginning, the auction price, the tiering process was structured to achieve a robust auction in the state to make sure that the supply of RECs was robust. It's important to have a stable process so that the solar industry can know that these auctions are coming, produce the amount of RECs that need to be produced to minimize the cost to the customers of the results of the auction.
What factors will determine whether Delmarva purchases the additional 6,000 SRECs in this auction?
The same that we use in 2015. The way the auction works is we commit. Let me back up one step. In 2015, there was one new option that occurred. There was a lot of conversation about, do we have a cap on the price? The problem with a particular cap on the price is once you set the cap, everybody bids $1 below the cap. So the committee voted that Delmarva has complete discretion when it gets auction results as to whether it will buy any of the RECs, any of the 12,000 RECs based on price. To do that, our group then looks at the prices across the region, looks at the demand for RECs, looks at the supply for RECs, looks at what the spot auction's doing, and makes a determination if we believe any of the prices in the auction, either in the tiering or in the 3,000 we get under our determination, are too high a price. In 2015, the determination was made that the overall auction price of $78 was appropriate. To reduce risk and volatility going forward, we went ahead and bought the 12,000 RECs. And we'll do the same analysis when we get the 2016 results. We'll look at the pricing of all the different tiers. We'll look at the pricing of the additional 6,000 RECs. If at some point we believe that the RECs get to be prohibitively expensive, Delmarva will simply cut off the auction and buy whatever that number of RECs recommends.
Okay, let me make sure I understood you correctly. I think I may have misheard you. You said in the 2015 auction, Delmarva had the discretion to purchase or not to purchase SRECs.
That is correct.
All of the SRECs?
Yes.
Okay, and that is true under this auction as well?
The concern was that in 2014, there was a question because the 2014 auction was not as robust as we wanted. Some of the prices in the tiers got to be above where we were getting concerned. And there's where the conversation took place about caps. Do we want to cap the price at 100, 200, 150? Number one, it's a little bit of an arbitrary decision. But two is once you set that price, that's where the market will go to, assuming that that's the price. So instead of that, there was unilateral decision given to Delmarva that at any time under the 12,000 RECs in the 15 and 2016 auction, Delmarva can raise its hand and say these prices are too expensive and then not purchase those RECs.
On what basis would Delmarva make a determination that the RECs were too expensive?
So our procurement group that handles the REC auctions for the entire PH organization does the analysis, determines what the spot market looks like, how many RECs are in the spot market, the volatility of the spot market, and the cost of the RECs compared to other states, and makes the determination based on those factors as to whether or not it would like to exercise that option.
If Delmarva doesn't buy SRECs from the auction, where would they buy them from?
In the short term, those RECs would come from the spot market.
And Delmarva has been offered SRECs from qualified utility-scale photovoltaic projects in North Carolina with 3-year contracts. Is that correct?
Delmarva has accepted prices from those type of organizations on the spot market for 1-year contracts. There have been discussions with the procurement organization of whether they would like to take 3-year strips. To my knowledge, they have not yet exercised a 3-year strip for RECs, but to my knowledge, they have not done that. There has been those discussions. So there's somewhere between the spot 1 year and a 20-year contract, there are discussions about short-term spot market 2, 3, 4-year strips, correct?
What's the spot market price for SRECs in Delaware right now?
I would assume what I understand, because I don't do the spot market, somewhere in the $25 range.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Iori.
Thank you.
Ms. Donahue, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'm actually representing staff.
Okay.
Mr. Mort, Delmarva has a legal obligation to comply with procuring the SRECs for 2016. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that number is 15,000?
The number for 2016 is we need a total of 73,000, and we are buying. Remember, this is the 5th year, so there's a lot of RECs under contract. This year, we could add up to 15,000 additional long-term contract RECs.
And if Delmarva is forced to purchase these on the spot market, there are some risks involved.
Absolutely
Can
risks.
you describe those risks?
So one of the things you keep very confidential is how many RECs you're putting into the spot market. If you're bidding into the spot market and you only want 1,000 versus 20,000, you can understand that the price would be impacted by the amount of spot market RECs you want out there. The task force recognized that and voted a couple years ago that the appropriate mix was probably in the 10% range. As I've indicated earlier, that number is getting to be a relatively large percentage and a relatively large amount of RECs. And there is a concern with that kind of demand for RECs, depending on the supply side of that equation, you could start to pay a fairly significant amount for a spot market REC.
And that price could potentially be higher than what would be obtained in the auction process.
It certainly could approach that, and the problem is when you buy a spot market REC, they only last 1 year, so you got to go through that whole process again the next year, and the requirement for our purchases go up. It's 73,000 in this year, it's 87,000 next year. So if you continue to use the spot market too great, that number gets to be a very large number and creates the risk that you've talked about.
And then there would also be an additional risk of adding volatility to customer bills. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And the 3 concerns that you discussed that have been raised by the public advocate concerning Tier 3 and expanding the access by utility scale, the Tier 2 concerns about their costs of entry and also the leasing, those were really raised in the context of the 2017 program. Is that correct?
Pretty much. They've been discussed by the committee on and off, but I think as described in there, as I've said, they will be significantly addressed by the 2017 auction process.
And they really haven't been raised in the context of whether the commission should approve the 2016 program, which is at issue today.
Correct, not to my knowledge.
All right. Anything else? Okay, thank you. No more questions.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stevenson? Any questions, sir?
I'm here as a witness for the public advocate.
Okay. Ms. Scott? Questions? Any further witnesses, Ms. Scott?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Mirek?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff is going to call Joseph DeLosa to testify. He can be sworn.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Could you please state your name for the record?
Sure. Joseph DeLosa,
And who is your employer?
Delaware Public Service Commission,
And your business address?
861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Suite 100, Dover, Delaware 19904.
And what is your position at the Public Service Commission?
Public utility analyst.
All right. And what was your role in this docket?
My role in this docket was to review the submission and particularly to identify any changes from the 2015 program.
And could you describe the changes from the 2016 program application versus what was approved in the 2015 application?
Sure. There were, as Delmarva represented, largely two changes to the program. The first was increasing the number of SRECs that could be procured through the long-term contracts from 12,000 to 15,000. And secondly, reducing the tier, that middle tier, or I believe it was the break between the lowest tier and the second tier, from 30 kW to 25 kW.
Okay. And do either of those changes bring any concerns about the Commission's approval or staff's recommendation to approve the program?
No.
All right. And Delmarva's 2016 application also went through a process with the Renewable Energy Task Force. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did staff participate in that task force process?
Yes, I did. I did not. Pam Knotts did.
Okay.
On behalf of staff.
But you're aware of what occurred at the Renewable Energy Task Force?
Yes.
And the Renewable Energy Task Force did approve the application in the form that it is today before the Commission?
Yes.
All right. And did the Commission reopen the opportunity for public comment before today's hearing?
Yes.
And public notice was published to that effect?
That's correct. So public notice was published twice in this docket. Once before the originally scheduled evidentiary hearing, and once again before today's evidentiary hearing.
And were any public comments received before today's today's evidentiary hearing?
No.
Okay. And what is your recommendation to the Commission regarding Delmarva's application?
I would recommend that the Commission approve the 2016 SREC procurement program as submitted.
Okay. And why do you make that recommendation?
I recommend approval for three main reasons. The first is that the SREC procurement program was thoroughly vetted through the Renewable Energy Task Force, which includes, as Delmarva mentioned, a large swath of renewable energy industry stakeholders. The Renewable Energy Task Force also provided other opportunities for public comment aside from the public notice of today's evidentiary hearing. And lastly, the 2016 program was based heavily on the 2015 program that the Commission found was in the public interest and was approved as submitted last year.
Okay. And do you have anything else to add to your testimony today?
I do not.
All right. Mr. DeLosa is available for cross-examination.
Commissioners have any questions of Mr. DeLosa? Ms. Scott, any questions of Mr. DeLosa?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Iori?
One question, Your Honor. Mr. DeLosa, you didn't file any testimony or comments in this docket prior to today, did you?
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Scott?
And that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Chair Winslow. The public advocate calls David Stevenson to the stand and asks that he be sworn.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Stevenson, would you please state your name and business address for the record?
Yes, David T. Stevenson, P.O. Box 329, Lewis, Delaware.
And by whom are you employed?
Alternative Strategies Consulting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Alternative Strategies Consulting.
Could you please describe your educational background for the Commission?
Yeah, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Agricultural Economics from Rutgers University.
And would you please describe your employment experience for the Commission?
Yes, I spent 23 years at the DuPont Company doing various economic, technical, marketing, and business management responsibilities, including 30 years ago working in the solar industry and the wind industry. Since leaving DuPont, I've started 6 businesses, most of which are being run by family members at this point, so I have the time to be with you folks.
How did you become involved in the energy industry?
First of all, I had a construction business, and I became part of it with the Green Building Council. I was one of the founding members of the Green Building Council. But 5 years ago, I started working with the Cesar Rodney Institute as an analyst for particularly electric issues and have been involved regularly since then.
And have you been involved in other dockets involving the SREC procurement program?
Indeed. With Cesar Rodney Institute, I was an intervener in the 2012, 13, and 14 SREC auction process. And 2015, I was a consultant and witness for the public advocate. Again, also for the 2016 procurement process.
Now, you were retained by the public advocate to review the application for the approval of the 2016 procurement program, correct?
Yes,
And did you review the application?
I did at length.
And did you have any concerns about the proposed 2016 program as it was described in the application and the attachments thereto?
Yes.
And do the comments filed by the public advocate on November 30th, 2015 describe those concerns?
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson, did you draft the comments that were filed by the public advocate?
Yes.
Did you have any assistance in drafting those? Or what, were they prepared by you or under your supervision and control?
They were prepared by me.
And do you have any changes or corrections to make to those comments at this time?
No, they were accurate at the time they were filed. And since then, Denmark has finalized the cost cap regulation and has decided that there will be no freeze. And the cost caps have not been exceeded.
Chair Winslow, at this time, I would like to have the comments of the public advocate marked and admitted as an exhibit. We did have an exhibit log prepared by staff's counsel, and it was identified on that exhibit log as Exhibit 3.
Any objection to the admission as Exhibit 3? Hearing none, it's submitted.
Mr. Chairman, could I actually add, if the parties don't object, that we admit the other 5 exhibits as well? Or there's 6 total, so the one that the public advocate just admitted is 3, that we also admit 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Sounds reasonable. Is there any objection to that?
No objection.
Hearing none, then we will do that.
Thank you. Pardon the interruption.
Would you please describe the DPA's concerns as reflected in those comments?
Yes, the first was that the RPS cost cap calculation regulation had not been completed and no determination had been made whether a freeze was required. That has been met. The second was if no freeze was instituted, it was possible that the 2016 SREC auction actually might go over the cap. That is still a question mark. The 2016 procurement plan effectively excludes the purchase of low-cost SRECs from utility scale systems, as Mr. Moore has already stated. And another objection was that the tier N2 has persistently been high SREC prices, and that needs to be addressed. And finally, that there may be, and I have no specific knowledge, but there may be different needs of the leasing industry, and the next RETF series of meetings should invite the leasing companies to participate to get their perspective on the auction.
Now, does the DPA contend that the Commission should reject Delmarva's application in this docket?
No, not based on the freeze. The Commission always has the responsibility to determine whether any rate increase is just and reasonable. And the SREC auction is a rate increase, one that we don't know what the price will actually be.
But the DPA is not recommending that the Commission reject the application at this time, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, are there any other options that Delmarva has to buy the SRECs that it needs other than from this auction?
Yes, there are a number of options. We've talked a little bit about the North Carolina SRECs. We're not talking about a few SRECs here. Last number I heard was something like 50 to 60 megawatts of capacity have been built in Delaware since the Renewable Portfolio Standard started. We're looking at systems that in North Carolina, 200 megawatt systems, 50 megawatt systems. We're looking at systems in Maryland that will qualify for Delaware. are in the size of 200, 150 megawatts. We're talking about an incredible number of new capacity coming online that could supply SRECs for Delaware. We're talking hundreds of thousands of SRECs being available. What has happened in the last, the Renewable Energy Task Force finished their work 8 months ago. Since that time, the price of SRECs in Maryland has dropped from $175 to about $25, and according to Flat Exchange, $0. In Pennsylvania, SRECs have dropped from $35 to $15. Ohio has gone to somewhere near $0. North Carolina is $0. New Jersey is an exception. It's still high because of the structure of their SREC process. Those prices just aren't going to come down. But when you look at other places, the SREC prices are dropping remarkably fast. And part of that is because the prices come down to the part. The world has changed. Currently, utility scale solar has reached grid parity. You can produce a solar utility scale system that will produce power essentially equal to what you can buy from PJM on the LMP market, and essentially get the SRECs for free. So one of the things that happened in the IRP workshop is Delmarva has agreed to look at a scenario of doing something with utility scale in this next IRP coming up, the 2016 IRP. But you've also got even the Solar Energy Industry Association, the National Association, is reporting that 40% of the construction is being done outside the renewable portfolio standards around the country. We've got just tremendous amounts of increased capacity, which is making the spot market prices extremely low. For example, the Sustainable Energy Utility has a purchase program for SRECs that's averaging around $17 for 20-year contracts. So on the spot market, we might be seeing prices from anywhere from just north of $0 to about $17. I estimate that this auction is going to actually be higher than the last auction for the bid prices. The price, average price for Tier N1 was $53 in the 2014 auction, $60 in the 2015. I think it could go to $87 this time. One of the things that's happened is we've lowered the the Green Energy Fund subsidies. When you do that, in the last auction, the auction price went up just enough to compensate for that lower GEF grant. So if we see the same thing this time, we could see an $87 Tier 1 and N1 and $127 N2 bid. We're looking at very high bids in the $100 range, where we could be buying them on the spot market for well less than 20.
And Mr. Stevenson, you were here when Mr. Moore and Mr. DeLosa testified regarding potential volatility in the spot market, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any comments on that?
All I can say is the Solar Energy Industry Association, it's not my estimate, it's their estimate, shows that we are at grid parity with prices still dropping at all tiers. As prices drop, there will be more construction. As there's more construction, there will be more SRECs around. I don't see any scenario where there is a shortage of SRECs anytime in the near future.
Now, did you have suggestions for the RETF to consider for the 2017 procurement program?
Yes. Number one is we have got to address the utility scale issue. Basically, when you're getting all of your purchased SRECs from the lower tiers, you're discouraging any utility scale. You're basically freezing them out of the market. They're not needed in Delaware. Someone may, and I hope they will do it without considering the SRECs, but at this point there's nothing on the table that says there will be utility scale construction in Delaware. So we've got to address that issue. The N2 issue, we've talked about, this is now the third auction. We've discussed this without any changes. It was supposed to be discussed in this iteration, and we spent about 5 minutes on it in the Renewable Energy Task Force meetings, and it was dismissed as, well, it's not that important, it's not that much money. I have no confidence that it will get any better hearing in the next iteration, but it needs to be addressed. And finally, as we've discussed, we need to talk to the leasing companies and see if there is anything in the auction process that either encourages or discourages them. By some numbers, leasing is generating 4 times the new systems as is being generated by the small companies participating in the RETF.
Now, Mr. Moore testified that leasing companies could in some way manipulate the market by their participation. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And do you have any comment on that?
That is a possibility, and it would have to be addressed when we're talking about how we deal with the leasing companies. Leasing companies have the unusual situation where they get a lot more money out of the federal 30% investment tax credit than everybody else does. Solar City put out a report for the fourth quarter of 2015 that showed their cost nationally was $2.77 a watt. Put that in perspective, utility scale is $1.33. A lot of small producers in Delaware are at $3.50, so it's kind of in the middle of that range. But what they turn into the federal government for credit is based on what they call fair market value, which takes into account the financing cost. And that number is averaging $5. So let's say a company like Dale's, I see in the back, was offering a system at $3, and their system got a 90-cent federal tax credit. The same system from a leasing company might get $1.80 from the federal government. So they need less money, so they need less money from SRECs. So that could lead to a situation where they were underbidding SRECs.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson is available for questions from the commission and from the other parties.
Mr. Stevens, you've made those comments about the large-scale utility projects and other comments about the tiers. You haven't made any recommendations to us, at least not that I heard, or maybe I missed it. Are you saying that we should not approve the 2016 auction that's been requested by Delmarva, and then examine these issues positively in the 2017? Or are you saying we should not approve the 2016 and we should address those issues now?
Well, the world has certainly changed. I am a witness for the public advocate, and so I will not. The public advocate is not planning at this point to recommend not doing the 2016 auction.
Okay.
You, on the other hand, do have the responsibility. Is this just and reasonable? The auction will add $1 million to $1.5 million to Delmarva Power customer bills. Buying entirely on the spot market would add 1/10 of that. So whether there should be, it's been 8 months, whether there should be other changes or not on the 2016 auction is up to the commissioners.
What's the date of the 2016 auction?
It hasn't been set. It'll probably be several months. I would guess June or July.
It will be the last week in May, the first week in June.
So it's right around the corner, obviously.
Correct. Originally, it was scheduled for the March timeframe, but obviously the tabling of it pushed that back.
So it sounds to me then that the need for stability in the marketplace might exceed the desire to make certain changes that might make it arguably less expensive in the 2016 timeframe. Is that Delmarva's position?
I would say yes, but I would say that I would take exception to certain comments. So, but yes, I think in general the auction was approved, understanding those, and that's what we recommend.
Commissioners, any further questions?
Mr. Chair, yes, I have a couple of questions, please. As I read through some of the evidence provided to us, I noted that these are long-term 20-year contracts. and owners that are signing up to provide these SRECs, what happens if the owner defaults? And have there been any defaults?
So there have been, and it depends on the tier. If they're smaller tier organizations, there really is no consequence. The higher tier, depending on whether if they submit a bid and the deposit and they don't follow through, they can lose deposits, those type of things. If they decide not to participate in the auction after they start and they withdraw sending SRECs in, they're not allowed to participate in the auction again. What we don't want is somebody to have a contract for $60, the spot market go to 80 and they sell them into the spot. So there are some provisions in the document that tries to deter folks from doing that.
I've also seen a couple of statements that administrative costs for the SEU incline will not be dealt with in these hearings. How is it the affirmative? How is that being dealt with and by whom?
So the answer to that question, to the best of my knowledge, is the fact that you're actually approving the auction to take place. It's during the SOS process where Delmarva then follows its cost for all SOS, including the solar RPS, and that's when you physically vote to approve that we did the right thing when we signed the contracts and any administration cost that goes along with it. That's when you get the final determination as to whether the customers pick up that charge.
Okay. So that brings one last point to the table. I'm trying to look at all of this conversation through the customer's lens.
Yes.
And I know that DENREC has done a lot of work in terms of determining whether or not there should be a freeze, but I haven't really seen any charts or statements about the actual estimated additional cost on a Delmarva customer's ratepayer's bill. Can anybody estimate that for me?
I
think, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Mr. Stevenson, I think, did make that estimate. I think he testified to it.
I mean, Commissioner Gray, the commission recently approved the SOS with the RPS component from the last auction, maybe about 6 weeks ago. And all of those costs for the last auction were included in that. And so what happens is, as we go through the SOS process, which was just recently filed last month, and we will go through that process, and you ultimately approve rates for that. That will include the prices going forward for the next auction, because that's part of the RPS cost component. So there is a bit of a delay when you actually see the cost, because until we actually go through the auction, we're not going to have all the information that you would need.
Right, but that's the process for which I appreciate. But has anyone estimated what range impact this might have, dollar-wise, to the ratepayer? Thank you.
Probably 50 cents to $1 per month.
Per month, okay. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Scott?
Good afternoon, Chairwoman, Commissioners. I have with me today Mr. Underwood and Mr. Noyes from DENREC. Both would like to offer comments. And I'll start with Mr. Underwood.
Excuse me. This is actually an evidentiary hearing. Are the witnesses going to be sworn?
Mr. Underwood, please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Robert.
State your name and place for the record.
My name is Robert Underwood. I'm a program administrator with Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. I work at West Water Street, Dover, Delaware.
What are your duties with the Division of Energy?
As a program administrator, my duties include the development of policies that promote clean and reliable energy. In addition, I'm also the chair of the Renewable Energy Task Force.
What is the purpose of your testimony, sir?
In my brief testimony today, I will focus on the stakeholder process of the Renewable Energy Task Force and the development of the auction, as well as the official viewpoint of the department with regard to this docket. I will leave Tom Noyes to testify a little bit more on the economics of the procurement, as well as any questions on the cost cap determination.
Can you describe the role of the Renewable Energy Task Force in developing the 2016 program?
Yes, I can. The Renewable Energy Task Force, as most folks in this room already know, was established by the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards Act, REPSA, which requires electric supply.
Sir, could you slow down? Thank you.
The Renewable Energy Task Force, which was established by the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards Act, REPSA, REPSA, requires electric suppliers operating in Delaware to purchase energy from eligible energy resources to meet a portion of their retail load. The task force met 3 times after the 2015 auction to review the results of the auction and design the 2016 auction. The program recommended by the Energy Task Force, Renewable Energy Task Force, reflects a consensus of stakeholders, which includes DENREC, the Commission staff, the advocate, and many other stakeholders.
And what REPSA requirements did the task force consider?
Statutory charge to the task force, which is found in 26 Delaware Code 360, includes creating balanced market mechanisms, minimizing costs, establishing revenue certainty, maximize in-state renewable generation, and ensuring that residential, commercial, and utility scale photovoltaic systems of various sizes are financially viable.
And can you summarize your testimony?
I sure can. The 2016 program is the result of 4 years of policy discussion among DENREC, Delaware Power and Light, public service staff, advocate, and other stakeholders. The 2016 program is based on a successful template established in the last 3 auctions and is designed to maintain a stable, competitive market for the next several years. DENREC looks forward to working with the members of the task force to monitor and evaluate the 2016 program and is committed to continue to work together to build a strong, cost-effective, and sustainable solar energy in Delaware.
In summary, does DENREC support the 2016 program?
Yes. Approval of the 2016 program will create a fair and competitive SREC market that will give all system owners the opportunity to compete for long-term contracts, as well as to continue to promote a growing supply of SRECs to push a downward pressure on the compliance costs. In addition, the 2016 program, like the programs before it, the 2013, 2014, 2015 programs, is open to owners of existing systems as a matter of equity and to maximize competition by promoting the greatest participation in the auction. So therefore, DENREC strongly supports the program as just, fair, and in the public interest and recommends its approval.
Chair Winslow and Commissioners, I'd also like to offer Mr. Noyes as a witness to testify. And if we have any questions, if we could direct those questions to the right person answers the question.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and place of work for the record.
I'm Thomas Noyes. I'm Principal Planner for Utility Policy for the DENREC Division of Energy and Climate, and I work at 100 West Water Street in Dover.
What are your duties at the Division of Energy and Climate?
I'm responsible for developing and implementing policies to promote clean energy. I serve as staff to the Renewable Energy Task Force and represent DENREC's interests in dockets before this commission.
What's the purpose of your testimony?
I will focus briefly on some of the economic and policy issues raised in the SREC procurement program now before you.
How has solar PV grown since the REPSA was amended in 2010?
Solar PV has grown from 8.6 megawatts at the end of 2010 to 71.8 megawatts. More than half of that represents small and medium-sized systems that are eligible to participate in this procurement. We've done that while reducing Green Energy Fund grants 4 times since 2010. And as has already been testified before this commission, while SREC prices have come down.
Why were the 2013, 2014, and 2015 programs used as a basis for the 2016 program?
This is a point that's already been raised, that creating a stable market is one of the criteria in the law, and we think that creating that stable market has helped promote the growing supply and lower SREC prices.
How do Delaware's SREC prices compare to those in other states?
Well, Mr. Moore already testified to that. We have brought SREC prices much lower than states with comparable PV requirements over the last several years. We think, again, this is because of the balanced portfolio approach we've adopted. Just as a balanced financial portfolio promotes stability, a balanced portfolio that allows long-term contracts to be balanced against short-term spot market purchases creates the best value.
Could you summarize your testimony?
Yes, the 2016 program is the result of carefully considered adjustments to the last three programs, includes added flexibility on the part of Delmarva Power, so that Delmarva Power can buy or not buy 6,000 SRECs through long-term contracts, which allows the company to balance those prices against what it's seeing in the spot market. We think we've created a long-term stable market and that we're seeing the benefits in the SREC prices we've seen compared to other states. As Mr. Underwood just said, I'll repeat, we recommend approval of the 2016 SREC program as just, reasonable, and in the public interest.
Mr. Noyes and Mr. Underwood are available for.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any commissioners have any questions of Mr. Underwood or Mr. Noyes? Any of the parties have any questions of either of those two fine gentlemen?
Yes, Chair Renslow.
Please.
Thank you. Mr. Underwood, you testified that the 2016 program reflects the consensus of stakeholders. Is that intended to mean that all of the stakeholders voted in favor of the program?
The stakeholders are task force members.
Task force members.
I believe I'd have to go with Mr. Thomas if he has his memory on it. I believe that it was a unanimous vote in favor of it, of the task force, or in favor of the auction.
If the DPA challenged you and said that the DPA did not vote in favor of it, would your opinion on that change?
The DPA may have abstained if that is correct. I will say it was a successful or a favorable vote to go forward with the auction. I do not recall if the DPA abstained, voted against, or voted for.
But if the DPA voted against it, then it wasn't unanimous, correct?
Correct, but it would be a favorable vote.
Overall.
A favorable vote.
And Mr. Underwood and Mr. Noyes, neither of you filed testimony in this proceeding, correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Iwory. Ms. Mayrak?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, or a few questions maybe. With respect to the Renewable Energy Task Force's approval of the 2016 SREC program, when did that approval take place?
August of 2015.
August of 2015. So in context, at that point, DENREC had not yet finalized the cost cap regulations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that has since changed.
That's correct.
And those were adopted in January of this year, correct?
Correct.
Okay, no more questions.
Does that prompt Commissioner Gray?
Chair Winslow, Mr. Stevenson advised me that he does need to correct a statement that he made in his testimony. We don't want to leave the commission with the wrong impression. So he misspoke and he wants to correct himself.
50 cents to $1 is per year, not per month.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mr. Underwood. Mr. Underwood, you mentioned that you're the chair of the Renewable Energy Task Force, yes?
That is correct.
In some of the testimony today, there's been some discussions about how to reorganize the tiers. And you did mention that utility scale are viable and should be viable and affordable in this process of the auctions, yes?
That is correct.
But that there should be more participation from utility scale providers.
I would say we're always looking at the opportunity to increase the participation for utility scale providers.
What would be the role of the Renewable Energy Task Force to try and ensure that that happens in the future?
I think having a robust discussion, as was previously said by Mr. Stevenson and by Mr. Moore here, to have robust discussions and see what's available and what kind of impact that would have on the SREC prices.
And is it your responsibility to set the agenda for the task force in such a way that this will be brought to their attention?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions for the commissioners? We're going to have final arguments. Scott, I guess you want to lead off. Any comments?
In conclusion, I would ask that the commission support the 2016 program, which has been through the process with the Renewable Energy Task Force. They recommend that it proceed. None of the parties here object to it proceeding, as best I can tell. So I ask that it be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. The Public Advocate is not recommending that the 2016 program not be approved. Let me just make that clear, since it seems to be a question in people's minds. But the DPA has raised significant questions, which I think the Commissioners have recognized, that perhaps the RETF may be, let me try to make this not pejorative, that perhaps minimizing the costs isn't one of the higher priorities of the task force. And we think, since Delmarva ratepayers are paying for it, that the rate, in addition to the other requirements of the REPSA law that require the task force to consider the various issues, that minimizing costs at least should be given equal priority to those other items that have been identified. This commission can do that, or can encourage the RETF to do that in its order in this case. You can approve the 2016 program, but you can direct that the task force consider utility scale solar, consider some of these other issues or ideas that the DPA has been offering in the task force meetings, and which have gotten short shrift. So while we are not suggesting that you should deny or reject this particular program, there are ways to make it better, and the Commission can encourage the task force to do that with its order in this proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iori. Ms. Mayrack?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. As you've heard here today, none of the parties are opposing the 2016 program application. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the program as submitted, and that you adopt Order 8884 today. All the concerns seem to be raised in the context of future applications, and any opposition seems to have been raised when the regulatory environment was much different. That is, before DENREC had finalized the cost cap regulations, which were final as of January of this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayrack. Ms. Scott? Thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to shout out to whoever might be out there on the internet who sent one of these 200 and some emails to us commissioners opposing and asking us not to approve this application. But thanks to the testimony, and I think especially to Mr. Stevenson's testimony, it's become clear, I think, that the concern in a lot of these emails is about cost, consistent with what Ms. Iori said. And I'm sure that DENREC and staff and everyone else understands that we're now, with Bloom and other costs, we're now at that level of public awareness that I think that the cost for the consumers has got to really give them some greater concentration with respect to how we go forward in the future. And I think you can tell from the questions asked, Commissioner Gray and others here, that we're concerned about the lack of utility scale, the opportunities that Mr. Stevenson talks about. We're concerned about the stability of the marketplace. I mean, you all, I think the committee has done a great job. I've been there sometimes when they've discussed things. They've done a very good job with respect to the marketplace and doing I think, really a commendable job. And I'm not sure how you're going to do it, how you're going to make a transition to this North Carolina large-scale utility. It's going to be a pretty difficult task, and so I'm looking forward to see how you all work. I have to confess I have a little bit of concern because there's public entities on the committee, but my perception, which might be incorrect, and if it's incorrect, please feel free to correct me, is that a lot of the retail people in the solar industry have a little bit more input, so to speak, than, let's say, the utility scale area. So I'm not sure that I'm correct on that, but that's just my perception. I would like the other commissioners to adopt Ms. Iori's suggestion, which is to make some suggestions to the committee that they consider, I believe, the three areas that Mr. Stevenson brought up: the utility scale, the
N2 tier,
and
and leasing.
and the leasing, all of which were nicely set forth in their comments with respect to this application. And I think if you all do that, I think that we'll be able to continue to praise the committee and continue to praise DENREC and their leadership in this area. But I do think it's a time for us to shift a little bit in our thinking and think a little bit bigger and think more about the consumers and the price. But I don't see the possibility of the price going up $1 over the next year to be reason to vote against this application. So I intend to support whoever motions that we approve the application. Any other comments by the commissioners?
Commissioner, Chairman, point of order, are we incorporating the three issues, utility scale, tier, N2, and leasing, into this order?
It's going to be amended. The proposed order will be amended per what Ms. Iori suggested, so that we'll have an amended order which can be signed, I assume, the next time we get together. Is that going to cause problems?
Now, the minute order that's been proposed actually reflects that more detailed order outlining what you decide would be entered at a later date.
Right, it does say that, incorporating everything that's been discussed there. So I move that we approve proposed order 8844 as amended.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to approve the proposed order?
Mr. Chair, before we actually take a vote, I do have one comment I'd like to make with respect to DENREC. Some of the concerns of the public advocate resonate with me in terms of the calculations that were done to arrive at a decision whether or not there should be a freeze. And the reason that they resonate with me is because I'm not exactly and specifically clear the PSC's role as either the collaborator with DENREC, the rule maker for DENREC, the endorsement of DENREC's decision making. So I would only request, and this has nothing to do with, it's related, but it doesn't impact the order. I would request that either through the Commission's legal counsel or in collaboration with DENREC, that someone provides the Commission with a little more clarity, because the statute is not specifically clear in this regard as to what exactly is our role when DENREC is making a calculation whether or not to freeze. Okay?
Commissioner Gray, what is clear in the statute is that we're a consultative body. And other than that, nothing is clear.
I got it.
So there are a couple lawsuits that are pending that might answer the question.
Ms. Iori has filed an appeal, and so we're going to have a court guidance from on high with respect to those issues.
So I just wanted to make that. It's related to this case. It doesn't in any way undermine the discussion that we've had, but I just wanted to make it clear that I'm still not specifically clear in this regard going forward. Okay, so
I want you to know you're in the great majority.
Thank you.
We have deputy attorney generals, on different sides of the issue. So,
okay.
In any case,
all right. Sorry, we're back to the second, the motion.
Right.
Second.
Unless there's any further discussion, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much to all the parties.
Thank you.
Number 2 on the hearing schedule is in the matter of the application of Mediacom Delaware LLC with the commencement of proceedings regarding the renewal of the cable television franchise to serve certain unincorporated areas of Sussex County. The Commission welcomes Mr. Coons on behalf of the applicant.
No.
Sorry to keep you waiting so long, Mr. Coons, but
Okay. Chair, are we supposed to have a order number 883? Do you have something? Do you have a document?
It'll be coming to us to sign after the meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Coons, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Todd Coombs on behalf of MediaCom Delaware. And with me today I have two witnesses who will have very brief testimony to offer to you in the case of this application for renewal of their franchise in unincorporated areas of Sussex County. Please state your name for the record. What is your title?
I'm area
Let's
director.
have them sworn in at
Okay.
the time.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And now will you please state your name for the record?
Pat Hines,
And what is your title?
area director of operations for MediaCom Delaware.
And can you describe MediaCom's operations here in Delaware?
Yes, we provide cable TV service and parts of Delaware, including Bethany Beach and unincorporated Sussex County.
And how large are your operations here in Delaware for the entire area?
As far as when our
Geographically?
we cover southeastern Sussex County and parts of Berlin, Maryland.
Okay. But for today, we're just discussing
Yes.
Delaware. And how many employees do you have here in Delaware?
Currently, we have 63 employees.
And where is your operations based out of?
We're in Dagsboro, Delaware.
Okay. And can you describe for the commission the amount of investment that MediaCom Delaware has made since 2012 going forward for its system?
Yes, in the last 4.5 years, MediaCom has invested over $20 million capital.
Okay. And what does that type of investment put into?
That's in our Delaware footprint. That's spread out. That would be put into maintaining our physical plant, office spaces, et cetera.
And did you participate in reviewing your application with staff?
I'm sorry?
With the Public Service Commission
Yes,
staff?
yes, I did.
And did you meet with Public Service Commission staff?
Yes, I did. Last week, Connie and Pam came down, did a tour of my office, my facilities. I'm glad to have you down there.
And during the course of this application, have you reviewed a proposed order that is now before the commission?
Yes, we have.
And is MediaCom Delaware in agreement with that proposed order?
Yes, we are in total agreement with the proposal and the reporting that is that goes along with it.
Okay, thank you. You swear.
Carrie Boggs. You swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
And can you state your name for the record, Ms. Boggs?
Carrie Boggs,
And can you state your title?
Government Relations Manager for MediaCom's Coastal Region.
And do you cover more than just Delaware?
I cover 9 states within our coastal region.
Okay. And was one of the comments given during the public comment sessions given by State Senator Gerald Hawker?
Yes, there was.
And can you describe generally what Senator Hawker's comment was with respect to?
So Senator Hawker came in and was there on behalf of his constituents. He actually reported that he had no complaints and no problems with our service. He had several accounts, both residential and commercial, through MediaCom. He was there to discuss that MediaCom offer a skinny package, which is something that we have heard not only from Delaware constituents, but across our footprint in the United States. And it's something we are working with our programmers to see if it's a possibility for us to offer. Our programmers, when we sign contracts with them, they dictate to us what channels we have to carry in specific bundles and specific channel locations. So more popular channels like TNT, Turner Networking, carry other secondary and tertiary channels along with them that we're required to carry within our family packaging or within specific digital tiers as per our contract. So we are working with our programmers to see about offering a skinny bundle and doing some test markets, hopefully within the 2016 year. I do not know what test markets those will be in, but it is something we are looking at offering.
So that type of package is something that MediaCom's looking at, but it's not there yet?
Correct.
No further testimony from MediaCom, but either of the witnesses are available for the commission or staff.
Who provides the better service, Comcast or MediaCom?
MediaCom.
Honestly, I think we're all equal when it comes to cable. Everybody has their ups and downs.
I wouldn't have expected that answer. Now, last question is, are you related to Caleb?
I'm going to say I have no idea. According to my mother-in-law, I'm related to anyone with last name Fox, but I have no idea.
Okay. Mr. Gray?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For how long have you been providing these services in Delaware?
So MediaCom bought this area in 1997. I'm not positive which month.
Okay. And I was going to ask a similar question, whether you were a monopoly where you were operating like some other companies are in parts of the state. In other words, you have competition.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a non-exclusive.
No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Mayorak, any questions of the applicants?
Commissioner Drexler, did you have?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Drexler.
I was reading the comments from some of your clients, and I noticed that somebody had a problem with no service on the weekend. Is that not true or true?
When they say no service on the weekend, does that mean that we didn't respond to them on the weekend?
I think the comment was that they only come down to their whatever vacation home on weekends, and they could not get a service call on a weekend.
No, that's untrue. We are fully staffed through the weekends.
On the weekend?
All of our new hires are hired for weekend days.
Okay.
Ms. Mayorak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the public comment sessions, there were both written and verbal comments received that indicated some issues with customer service. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as a part of staff's review of the franchise renewal agreement, staff has asked for a number of metrics to be provided on a monthly basis for the next year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And MediaCom has agreed to provide that information. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you are able to provide the information that's requested.
As just to clarify, as a business confidential.
Most of the information will be provided
Will be
under confidential to the extent required.
Okay, certainly. And the commission has regulations that the company is welcome to avail itself of to do so. All right. No more questions.
Ms. Iori?
We were not involved in this docket.
Is there anybody from the public here that wishes to be heard in this matter?
Staff does have a witness, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we can't hear, we'll hear from Ms. McDowell.
Mr. Chairman, staff would actually like to introduce into the record 12 exhibits that are indicated on an exhibit log and that were provided in advance to the meeting. These are proffered by both company and staff, and if there's no objection, I'd like to enter those into the record.
Admitted without objection.
Thank you. And staff calls Connie McDowell.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Connie McDowell.
And who is your employer?
The Delaware Public Service Commission.
And what is your business address?
801 that's me. I'm giving you the Home Depot address.
Sorry about that.
861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Denver, Delaware, 19904. Too used to saying that.
And what is your position at the Public Service Commission?
I'm the Senior Regulatory Policy Administrator.
And what was your role in this docket?
I was a staff member that was assigned to review the process and to make sure the process was followed for the franchise renewal, to look at the proposed franchise renewal to see if any revisions proposed by the company were reasonable, and to help put together the order and the final franchise agreement, and to attend all the public comment sessions and review the comments.
And this is actually, this is a 15-year franchise, is that correct?
That's correct.
So the last time MediaCom was before the commission was 15 years ago.
That's correct.
And if approved, this franchise would be effective until June 10th, 2031. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in terms of reviewing a franchise renewal, the commission's role, could you describe the commission's role?
Yes. First of all, we had to make sure that the company filed their intent within 3 years of the renewal. We had to make sure that the franchise renewal was just and reasonable, and we had to take into account any public comments to make sure that the company was providing good service and that they had the managerial, technical, and financial means to provide the service.
And did the Public Service Commission make sure that public notice was provided of, there were 3 different public comment sessions that were made available to the public to provide comment on the franchise renewal. Is that correct?
That's correct. We had 2 public comment sessions in the winter of 2014, and because there's a lot of seasonal subscribers, we had one additional one in July of 2015, and they were all publicly noticed.
And did you or your staff attend those public comment sessions?
Yes, we did.
And what did the comments from the public reveal?
Most of the comments were about picture quality, calling into customer service, having techs come out to the house in a reasonable amount of time, and multiple truck rolls.
And to address those comments, what is staff recommending?
Staff is recommending some metrics be provided by the company during this next year to see if there is an improvement in performance.
And the company has agreed to provide that information?
Yes, they have.
All right. And in terms of the franchise renewal, Mediacom also provided a revised franchise agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And have you reviewed that agreement?
Yes, I did.
And what are the changes that have been proposed in the proposed franchise agreement versus the one this commission approved 15 years ago?
Most of the changes were due to the change in the technology used to provide the service. It used to be a lot of analog type devices, and now it's digital. And so signal, I guess the information provided to the commission is now obsolete. And they also wanted to add terms or language in there that that they would be consistent with Section 626 of the Cable Act, because the feds could make changes. So they, instead of changing the franchise or keeping it, consistent, they just made a generalized statement.
And that generalized statement was basically that the Mediacom would have to comply with all federal and state law.
That's correct.
Okay. And do any of those changes to the franchise agreement cause concern with whether the commission should approve it today?
No, they don't.
Okay. And what is your recommendation to the commission regarding the franchise renewal?
Staff recommends that you approve the franchise proposal that's out there, plus put into effect the metrics that we've requested.
And those metrics are in the proposed order 8883, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And do you have anything to add to your testimony today?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McDowell is available for questions from the commission and from Mediacom.
Commissioner Gray?
Ms. McDowell, is this application changing in any way the scope of services they are requesting to provide, other than the technology that underpins?
No, the commission really only has jurisdiction over the video programming, and they do provide other services, telephone and which is voice over the internet, and the internet services, which the commission has no jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Mr. Correa?
During the discussion with the applicant, is there any role Sussex County plays in this procedure at all, or because it's unincorporated, they don't get involved?
We did not hear from any of the municipals in the area that they do contract with, but the commission's jurisdiction is unincorporated areas.
Yeah.
Mr. Coombs, any questions of Ms. McDowell?
No questions.
Ms. Iowa, you're not involved in this, so Anything further from the parties? Any final comments?
No, Your Honor, we ask that the commission enter the proposed order.
Commission adopt order number 8883 as submitted.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order number 8883? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry for the long wait. Best wishes to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got some Sussex County perspectives of clients in the room. Is there anyone from the public here who wishes to make any comment to the Public Service Committee? Mr. Howe, all your...
Chairman Winslow, Commissioners. First, I guess I would like to extend my appreciation to Commissioner Correa for providing an excellent lunch for the commissioners and staff. My slice of pizza was outstanding, but I understand you got to move fast in this place. Dessert was a little limited, but other than that, I managed to get some lunch, and I appreciate that. For those of you who are not aware, the first week in May is designated as Employee Appreciation Week. While we appreciate our employees every day of the year, this week provides us an opportunity to show our appreciation with morning refreshment, lunches, all the low-budget items we can possibly muster together in order to show our appreciation. Unlike other health-conscious teams, our goal is to increase the overall weight of the PSC by virtue of refreshments and lunch. So we're working on that as quickly as we can. But
it's the second week of May, weight watching week.
But while I'm on the record, I would personally like to thank all of our employees for the great job that they do every day here at the PSC and extend my appreciation to them. Further comment. For those of you who do not read the Delaware Code on a regular basis, 26 LC 117D provides that medically certified utility customers cannot have their service terminated as long as they make good faith payments. The legislature kind of left the definition of good faith effort to make payments to this commission. Staff will be holding its first of two public utility workshops, public or utility workshops, on Thursday, May the 12th. It'll be starting here at 10 a.m. in our Dover office to discuss this issue. In addition, staff and hearing examiner Lawrence will be conducting a public comment session on Chesapeake Utilities rate case, and that will be on Tuesday, on May the 17th, starting at 6 p.m. here in our Dover office. And, of course, that will also be our next commission meeting starting at 1 p.m. that afternoon. Will be on May the 17th. Saving the best for last, I would like to invite Mr. Farber, Mr. DeLosa, Ms. Segner, and is Ms. Price here? Apparently not. To share their thoughts on a recent FERC denial of the joint Maryland and Delaware complaint on the proposed cost allocation for the artificial island project that was approved by PJM. I believe they all have some public comments that they may wish to make.
Excuse me.
Start with Ms. Segner.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gray.
Before we move to this topic, Bob, I have a question for you. Is
Yes,
there
sir.
any insight as to where most of the customers are who need this good faith consideration? For instance, you're holding this public forum in Dover, yes?
That's correct. I would imagine that those individuals needing to have access to this particular process are across the entire state of Delaware. We would envision that if, in fact, the staff comes back with any recommendations to the commission, that those recommendations would once again be publicly noticed, and at that point in time, we would propose that we would go across the entire state with at least 3 public comment sessions, 1 for each county.
Okay.
At this point, though, we felt it was better to, because we're not sure of the practices of the various utilities, we thought it would be best to get the utilities together in a public forum to understand exactly how they treat this effort.
Okay, just one question for them in the room. It might be, where are these cases most frequently occurring for them? And then that'll give us an indication, perhaps, in the next stage. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Secretary, would you like to start off with, please?
Sure, be happy to. My name is Sharon Segner, and I'm with LS Power. And we were awarded part of the Artificial Island project, which it was part of the subject of the Delaware Public Service Commission's complaint at FERC. In terms of, we have reviewed the recent FERC order denying the Delaware Public Service Commission's complaint. And our reaction to it was that we were very disappointed with the order and see a number of challenges in terms of in the order. And we believe that there are some excellent issues that FERC should reconsider in terms of looking at the order. And we are, in particular, we're pleased to see Commissioner LaFleur's dissent on the order. It was a 3-1 vote denying the complaint. So we were particularly happy to see Commissioner LaFleur's dissent and think that she added some very good points. And as we're evaluating the order, we're looking closely at that dissent and what our next steps are. Our interest is providing value, legal value, to additional arguments that FERC needs to look at. And so our focus is reviewing the order right now and hopefully providing additional value as the process goes on from that standpoint. In terms of LS Power's, just to clarify where LS Power is at, LS Power did provide a cost cap with our portion of the Artificial Island bid. That cost cap was part of our designated entity agreement with PJM that was filed at FERC. It also was a part of our rate case at FERC. From LS Power's standpoint, nothing has changed with our cost cap commitment, and we are continuing to be focused on the development of the project. But nothing has changed in terms of our cost cap commitment. And I would also say we did sign a designated entity agreement associated with this project with PJM, and as a part of that designated entity agreement, not only were the cost cap provisions part of that, but LS Power did provide credit support for our commitment to the project. So behind our commitment on the project is almost $6 million of credit support for our portion of the project. And then the last thing I would say is that PJM is in the process of conducting a stakeholder process on lessons learned from Order 1000 and the first competitive solicitation processes in PJM. And we think that as part of dealing with some of the challenges ahead on the Artificial Island cost allocation issue, we think that the stakeholder process relating to the lessons learned from Order 1000 could be extremely fruitful. And we are going to advocate very strongly that PJM focus on really looking at upgrades in the future in terms of how those upgrade costs are monitored. And in addition, looking at how those upgrade costs are calculated to begin with, as well as how upgrades are defined. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Segner. Mr. Farber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, as Ms. Segner has mentioned, we have a recent FERC order that was, to put it kindly, very disappointing in their decision concerning Artificial Island. And so staff has been in the process of reviewing that order. As we proceed in director comments, I have some worksheets that estimate cost impacts as a result of recent events concerning Artificial Island. The cost estimates have changed for projects other than LS Power. Additionally, Mr. DeLosa has done detailed legal analysis of the order and will provide, should the Commission approve going into executive session, will review the results of his analysis and discussions with attorneys during that executive session. So, as you recall, Artificial Island dealt with facilities that were being built, and the way that the costs are being allocated pursuant to the FERC-approved methodology for PJM resulted in approximately 90% of the costs being assigned to the Delmarva zone. However, in assessing the benefits that would accrue to the Delmarva zone, those were closer to 10%. And so the complaint was filed, and we are where we are now in terms of trying to get relief from what's clearly, in staff's opinion, the allocation of costs that is not roughly commensurate with the benefits. So, with your permission, I have some worksheets that I could provide, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Delmarva zone, those were closer to 10%. And so the complaint was filed. I have a blank page in the middle there where I've separated documents that are more appropriate for discussion in the executive session as they provide particular customer impacts, some worksheets, as well as other information that is better suited to executive session. So, this was where we started concerning certain aspects of the Artificial Island project that were assigned to Public Service Electric and Gas, which is PSEG or Public Service. And these were the originally approved estimates for the work activities assigned to Public Service. This total was $137 million out of a total original estimate for the project of $275.4 million. So on March 10th, we received notice from PJM that those costs were going to be updated by Public Service, and they now wanted to construct a static VAR compensator, which I hope you don't ask me what it is. It's an engineering thing, but it's a device that assures the flow of power, essentially. They wanted an additional $81 million for that. They wanted optical guy wire for $39 million, as well as expansion to the Salem substation for $152 million. So the increase that they were proposing was $137 million, which added an increase of about $135 million to the original project of $275.4. So we now have a total revised estimate of $410.75 million. So based on the network flow contribution, there are certain assignments to the Delmarva zone of these costs. So for certain of these projects, they are a higher voltage, which qualifies for what's called a 50/50, which 50% of those costs are spread to everybody. It's on a load ratio share, and the other 50% is on the solution-based defects. The solution-based defects is about 99%. The load ratio share is about 2.4%. So here you see these are the high voltage projects. So the result is 51.2%. The solution-based defects provide roughly 100%. So of the projects, these are the increase in dollars, the percentage increase, and then based on the Delmarva zone peak load contributions, these are the shares that go to those entities that are in the Delmarva zone. Roughly, it's Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. So 59.17% goes to Delaware, and these are the increased costs that go as a result of the airport updated estimates that we got from public service. So this was the original project costs and allocations, and I don't know if it's clear enough in your copies, but for example, these public service projects are where the 50/50 occurs, and you can see that Delmarva is 2.43%, whereas on the solution-based defects, it's the 99.98%. So the original cost estimate was $275.45 million. Delmarva's zone share of that was $246. We now have the updated cost estimate. Delmarva's share, that's $107 million. So the total artificial island cost estimated is now $410, and approximately $353 million of that falls to the Delmarva zone. I have a carrying charge, which essentially represents the cost for return on investment as well as recovery of taxes. And I've changed that from 15% to 20%, basically to recognize that we're now dealing with an entity that does not provide cost cap or any other type of limitations on how these costs will occur. So I had 15% in previous calculations, which I provided to you, but I still think that 20% is conservative. Using that, I've calculated an annual revenue requirement, which is approximately $70 million for the Delmarva zone. So adding the transmission revenue requirement that's currently in effect until May 31st. So based on that, there's $202 million for an increase of 53%. And I would really have to caution in terms of absolutes, because this number, the $132 million, is the annual transmission revenue requirement that Delmarva did file for the zone. However, there are certain factors that are going to occur in updates that are going to be filed in a couple of weeks for the upcoming delivery year. So, for example, as you may recall, we achieved a settlement in our complaint against PHI concerning the level of return on equity. So we now have a 10% return on equity versus 10.8 that was previously reflected in the $132 million. Additionally, we were able to obtain a refund for the period in which our complaint was in effect, and that's a few $1 million as well that will accrue to the Delmarva zone. So there can be a lot of factors that are going to be impacting that transmission revenue requirement. I haven't seen the filing yet, but I would guess there's going to be higher costs in there. There's going to be these other factors on ROE that are going to go the other way. Additionally, there's a factor concerning the allocation of costs that was remanded from the courts to the FERC. And just as an aside, I to know I'm scheduled to attend a publicly noticed settlement workshop on Thursday, and I will be able, at some point, to be able to update the commission in terms of where we are in that. So, in open session, I'd rather not discuss which way the adjustment will occur, but needless to say, it will affect that annual transmission revenue requirement. So, all in all, I think these numbers give you a relative impact, but I would caution against taking absolutes from these calculations. What I've done is, based on this increase, I've allocated the costs to the rate classes of Delmarva. For the larger customers, like primary time of use, 3,300, or the largest is transmission level delivery customers, and they're getting that $40,000 increase. Residential customers, on average, would get that $12. Now, that also is subject to discussion because I do not have the transmission costs are allocated and recovered from customers on a peak load contribution basis or a demand basis, which I do not have for the typical customers. So the only way I was able to calculate it was based on the number of customers. So that $12, for example, on a per peak load contribution basis is $2.27. So it would depend on where that average customer's peak load contribution is as to how that would impact the average customer. So, for example, if it was an average of 5, then 5 times $2.27 would give you the typical impact of this increase of this project. So that is basically the information that's publicly available, and I would take any questions you might have.
The line that I assume it's LS Power that's running the line from the plant across Salem. Can't see, but over to the red line. That's LS Power, right?
Right.
Okay,
it's not red line. It's Salem.
Salem, and then it's a new substation, a new switching station here in Delaware.
Right.
Red Lion?
Yes, or around. It's near Red Line.
Okay. So, what is the purpose of the line from New Jersey to Delaware?
The purpose of the line from New Jersey to Delaware is to address stability-related issues that are ongoing related to the Salem and Hope Creek nuclear power facilities. It's needed for reliability purposes in terms of related to the existing nuclear facilities across the water.
So that line enhances their stability in New Jersey.
Yes, and PJM is of the view that it is addressing a regional reliability problem.
Thank you.
So, Commissioners, the rest of the discussion would be concerning the order that we received and Mr. DeLosa's review. My high-level assessment is that the Commission basically accepted the transmission owner's argument that this outcome of the cost allocation didn't matter because there were 1,200 other applications where it was just and reasonable, as well as a new argument that the TOs brought up at the technical conference in saying that it may be not just and reasonable at this point, but because load will increase, this cost allocation responsibility will evolve over time, and therefore the Commission can approve this outcome because over time it will become more just and reasonable. Mr. DeLosa can summarize some more of the issues in the order
What happens if it doesn't become more just and reasonable over time?
Well, I guess it's a question of the amount of time. Certainly over the next couple centuries, there may be a sufficient change in load that would result in a just and reasonable allocation based on the load projections that we've seen, staff has seen. There's not much change in the load flow, so these cost allocation responsibilities would remain in place for a long time.
I guess that means, Mr. Chair, that everything levels out over time. I have one question, please. So when I noticed this allocation by zone, is the reason you only are showing Delaware, Maryland, Virginia is because it's a DPL's presence in those jurisdictions? Is it a DPL?
Those entities represent the Delmarva zone.
Okay, so it's within the Delmarva
zone
across the state.
Part
That's
of that
why I don't
Delmarva
see
zone,
any New Jersey in there?
No. Delmarva zone includes Delmarva Power and Light. It includes ODEC, which is the cooperative out of Virginia. It includes Easton, as well as parts of Maryland, served Delmarva, Maryland.
Am I confused? Does Delmarva have presence in New Jersey?
No. Their holding company, public PHI or Exelon, however you want to look at it, includes Atlantic City Electric. So that is the entity that serves New Jersey. But Delmarva Power and Light does not have service to New Jersey.
Mr. DeLusso, I understand that you're going to give us a briefing on the legal aspects of this with the, I guess, the view that make recommendations to the Commission on legal strategy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm going to give a very high-level overview.
Well, he's going to make a couple of comments. I think that he's going to ask that we go into executive session. I believe that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a very high-level summary, and then before I identify the issues and the errors that staff has identified, I'm going to ask that we go into executive session. So as John said, on April 22nd, FERC issued their order denying our request that FERC rule that the solution-based DFACS cost allocation is unjust and unreasonable. And basically FERC, as John said, denied the complaint. FERC found that the states had not met our burden to show that the cost allocation was unjust and unreasonable. As John said, FERC found that where a cost allocation method is accurate in a very high percentage of cases to which it is applied, that is a, quote, strong indicator that the method overall is just and reasonable. And for this, FERC cites as evidence that only two projects out of the 1,200, that number that John cited, raised concerns. And this was the evidence that they used to uphold their statement that where a cost allocation is accurate in a very high percentage of circumstances. FERC reiterated that the DFACS method, which is the method being used to allocate the cost of this project, focuses on the benefits of the facility as measured through the use of the facility over time rather than the reliability problem which drove the need for the project. This is FERC's main line of argument, is that they say Delaware benefits from the line as measured by DFACS. And what that means is FERC is essentially saying that Delaware uses the line, and by our precedent, use equals benefits. And so that is the major consideration that FERC is taking in this order. Lastly, they ruled that assigning the costs based on the cause of the project has, quote, flaws, and that solution-based DFACS results in a more just and reasonable cost allocation. Needless to say, staff has a multitude of issues and errors with the order that I will reserve until executive session.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, staff would request an executive session to discuss potential strategies, discussions with our attorneys, as well as some scenarios in terms of cost alternatives.
Commissioner Gray?
I so move that the commission go into executive session for the purposes as stated by the witness.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to go into executive session for purposes of legal strategy and litigation issues? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.